Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures Podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Today's topic, oh, wait a minute, will be right after Seth gives an intro.
Happy Tuesday.
There it is. All right. With that, we can begin. Today's main topic, we'll be talking through some pieces of the Microsoft Fabric adoption roadmap, talking through around business alignment. It's a good topic. I think there's been a lot of conversation around this one. For those who are listening live, we're starting a little bit early. Schedules have gotten chaotic, so we're just adjusting slightly here. But you can jump back to the beginning and start watching a little earlier. So sorry, we're starting a little bit early today. Just switching things up a bit. All right. Any kind of announcements or news? Let's transition to some news things. Anyone have anything going on in the Power BI community or things you're learning? I have one to bring to the table if you guys want to start with mine.
I'm really intrigued to see what yours is because you were mentioning a bit about it. Sounds frustrating.
All right. So, in lieu of Microsoft's recently released material around how to use Git integration, lake houses, build all the things, right? So there's bronze, silver, gold lake houses. Microsoft really has been kind of mute on this topic this whole time, kind of like, what do you do? What are the best practices here? They seem to have jumped on the medallion architecture. And so in doing that, there's a couple articles out there that describe how do you use Git integration and how does that Git integration work with your Power BI workspaces? Well, in going a little bit deeper with testing some of this, I'm trying to rationalize in my head, how do I get this lakehouse to move from dev to test to prod? Are there definitions that go with it? Are there shortcuts that go along for the ride? Like, how does this work? So as I was testing some things by using a deployment pipeline on top of a Fabric workspace, you get this really beautiful semantic model that appears. Well, semantic models, the default ones anyways, on top of the lakehouse, they do not get deployed with each environment. So you can move a lakehouse from dev to test, but you cannot move, or you do not even see in the list, the semantic model that lives on top of the lakehouse. Now, Tommy and I have been playing around with this a little bit in Learn Fabric. You can make relationships, you can make some measures, so you can add some things into that default semantic model. But it appears anything that is direct lake enabled, from what I understand, is something you cannot move with the deployment pipelines.
I have like 25 questions, and we'll
try to
listen to 3.
I feel like this is a major miss. I'm guessing this is eventually going to get here, but this is one thing I really like about a lakehouse right now is this whole direct lake experience. If I can't move it between different environments and have it rebind and have those definitions move between dev, test, and prod, this really defeats the whole purpose of the deployment pipeline anyways. I don't want to move just reports through the pieces without having the model go with it. I'm totally lost on why this is not finished out yet.
Okay, so give me a little more context here. If the default data set, you said, or is it any data set off the lakehouse?
Any direct lake, or any data sets built in the service do not appear inside the deployment pipelines.
What if I create it in Tabular Editor?
Can't see it. Seems like the only thing that goes along for the ride in the deployment pipelines is a PBIX. So if you can build a PBIX of it, you can use that to go between dev, test, and prod, which I'm sorely disappointed because I want to use direct lake on stuff, and I can't do it if I'm using a pipeline. It doesn't even make sense.
Okay, one other thing then. If I create a PBIR, or if I give the definition in desktop, it's import. Does that go through?
Import, again,
it's really import.
Yeah, so my understanding right now is if you have a Power BI desktop file, even if it's a PBIR or PBIX or PBIP file, when it gets published to the service, if you're publishing from desktop will take that PBIP or R file, bundle it, turn it into a PBIX file, and then publish it. Now, Tommy, I think what you're asking, you asked a question around the PBIR file. That's a little bit more, that's after you've linked the workspace to a repo.
Right.
And so in the repo, you'll now see there's a thin report called the PBIR, which is just the definition of the report. And you can modify those because it's in a format that you can modify. I think if you've already linked something to a workspace, I believe those will carry through. However, I did observe, I made a Git repo of our Learn Fabric workspace we had linked to Git, and then I tried to redeploy it to a blank workspace that had nothing in it, and I had errors all over the place.
This is
The
my
It
agreement.
wasn't working.
Yeah.
The notebooks were not syncing correctly. It was putting the artifacts inside the workspace, but nothing was like it all looked like it was like uncommitted files. Even after I just added the repo right to the list, I was like, what the heck's going on here? So even just adding a Git branch to a workspace seemed to change all the files for some reason. I don't know why.
And this is the same qualm I had a few weeks ago. I realized that creating something in Tabular Editor, going in, if that's also synced to a Git repo, I've seen translation issues, or it tries to transform or modify the file. If you had a PBIP or PBIR, tries to translate it, I would have definition options where I could not open up the file on desktop, even though I made no modifications.
Yep.
So I feel right now that the Git repo solution is not really what it looks like. A Git repo, it acts like one, but I don't know if the full backend is fully what we expect to be a Git repo, because those problems you should theoretically easily publish into a workspace, a new workspace, other artifacts from another Git repo.
I'm going to question this one slightly because I'm not sure if I remember exactly the details in this one. Maybe chat, you can fill me in here as well. In struggling with some of these pieces, is the Git integration still in preview? Is that something that's still a preview feature, even though the Fabric has been released? And I don't know if I have my fingers on the. I believe there's, even though we've released Fabric to general availability, I believe there are certain aspects of Fabric that are still in preview.
Yeah.
Maybe Git is one of them, because it's definitely rough right now, and I'm having a hard time really what I want it to do, what I think it should be doing right now. It should be just easily moving these files between environments. I should be able to see all my semantic models. It says they're syncing, but they don't come between the different environments. It's just, it needs to be refined more.
I just ripped through the technical doc. Yeah,
is it in preview still?
Git integration is still in preview.
So this is probably why this feels so raw, because it just is such a. It felt like it came with Fabric, like, yay, it's here, and it's still getting refined.
Microsoft, if you're listening, bring back the old school parentheses previews in your features. That used to be for all the old updates in Power BI desktop. It always came with preview, whether it was on the blog article or sometimes on the feature itself. It would always
There's some in there.
Yeah, it doesn't show me in the Git repos though, or in Fabric. It doesn't say, "Oh, what you're about to do is completely in preview," which could mess up some of your artifacts. Beware. Be wary. It's only to Seth's point in the technical documentation.
It does say that. If you go to the Git integration inside PowerBI.com, it does say Git integration quote brackets preview.
Okay, then that's on me then. But that's frustrating.
You owe me a steak dinner now.
Well, you gotta bet it, my friend. You gotta put literally the stakes on the table beforehand.
This is literally table stakes. We're betting on
table stakes.
Actual table stakes.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm having trouble too with the deployment pipelines. That probably the most important artifact in a workspace is probably your semantic model.
I was going to say, what is the most important artifact?
Right.
It is 100% your semantic model. Like, that's what you really want to have working, whether you're doing this or not. And the other thing I found out, and again, I don't think this is, I'm still trying to figure out if this is really a real thing or not. If you build a semantic model on top of a lakehouse, so you're building your own semantic model, so you're able to use Direct Lake when you do something like that. If you use that, you can't download the file.
No.
It stays in the service.
Yeah.
Now you can connect to it with an XML endpoint. You can script out the things that are in it, but you're not going to be able to. It doesn't, and that semantic model does not appear in the deployment pipeline. You cannot get it.
More importantly, as soon as you connect to the XML endpoint in a default, which I do not do, you cannot edit it on the web anymore. So if you have any translation issues, if anything were to occur where you need to modify it in the web, Tableau Editor has that integration, but not 100%. You've lost that. So I don't personally, I've refrained from touching the default data set, and I'm always creating my own semantic model because it just makes more sense. If something were to happen, I can create a new one. It's a pain in the arsenal to create
Funda.
in the arsenal to create a create a semantic model in the web to try to recreate measures. Sorry, that's another thing, but that doesn't pass through, which is the most vital part of Power BI. Dare I say,
Is the model.
is the model.
Anyways, Seth, you've been smirking over there this entire time. So,
Just
curious your
enjoying
thoughts,
the banter.
or just enjoying banter. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. I mean, the preview of things, right? Just there's some chat going around on what that means.
Yeah.
It just means you get ready for workarounds, right? or ways to get things. I think the challenge here obviously is not only one of kind of confusion, because there are so many different services and so many different hooks and so many different ways to do things that Fabric is trying to pull together. And for the most part, I think is doing pretty well, which is good because it's GA, right? But like all the hooks into it, the things that you would expect to work, the really important keys, like there's a lot that goes on here that I think it causes confusion and/or we have expectations that it is going to work, like you're saying, Mike. Like you forget that there are components or hooks or new things that they've launched with this on one particular part that aren't fully integrated across the whole ecosystem yet.
Yes.
And in reality, like one of the biggest ones that comes to mind that I was is the one security stuff too, right? Like we're still in that mode where it's GA, but without that component, there's a lot of this that you still got to figure out. There's manual workarounds. There's a way to apply this. Like I was just watching an Adam Saxton video now a couple days ago that he released, where it's you can apply security, but you're instantly in the realm of like SQL code, right?
Yeah.
I'm applying roles. I'm doing RLS or column level security, and
Yes.
it's different. It's like okay, but like that is a very specific use case. I need to go find your video in order to understand it and implement. It's just gonna hinder, I think, user adoption until those things really light up, and it's very upfront in people's faces of like, if I'm going to go implement this as a solution in my enterprise or for people across the board, that simplicity is where you get a lot of that traction. And just we're not there yet, but it's okay. I think the roadmap has it in place that it's on the way, or we're talking through some of the preview things that still aren't working yet.
Yeah, and I think that's just going to be the way that's just the way it's going to be for a while, right? I mean, it's the things you're getting with Fabric has always been a lot more IT technical back-end system type things, and that's how it's been. And so for Microsoft to really tout the advantage of where this really goes, and I really do think the advantage of this is really more towards the business user, because the IT organization already has all the tools at their disposal. They have Key Vault, they have ADF, they have all these other tools that have been built a long time ago and work really well. They're great. So is this a compelling enough story to move for me to initiate a move? Probably not. Can you use pieces of it now to help you build some certain things? Yeah, it'd be good. But I think it's up to the MVPs right now to really kind of like figure out what of the features are really workable and which ones are not.
Yeah. And that's where I kind of struggle a little bit with the conversations that we have, where it's current state, right? Like,
yes.
And I am all in on the end goal, right? Like where we want to be. But the struggle bus points for me, right, are what is the intent of Fabric? Well, if to your point, if we already have all the enterprise tools for the enterprise people, and we already had the business tool for the business people, and now we're integrating the system because we're going to enable the business to do more, it becomes a lot harder to
yes
like walk around or instantly dip in and say, oh yeah, you can totally solve this. Here's what you do. You need to go like understand this code that you've never written before in your life, and this is the context that you need to understand that you're applying security around, and that falls apart pretty quickly in my mind, right? And that's the challenge, I think, where that I have with Fabric as it stands is like I love the ecosystem that's being built. These are tool sets that I'm familiar with on the enterprise side and the back end. But if this is a tool for everybody or to mix teams together, are we just bringing teams together? Right? Or is it the pathway for business users to learn more about the data? And maybe it's a balance of both, but all I'm saying is like there's still this shelf, I think, that's pretty hard around like the technical parts of it, the data engineering parts of it that are going to be struggle points for the business that need to erode over time here as quickly as possible so that you're opening up that ecosystem to a larger audience, because right now that's, I think, the friction point.
And honestly, on the same point, if what's Microsoft's Fabric's biggest touting point, it's an end-to-end solution.
Mhm.
You can't introduce pieces of it that work and other pieces that don't, like the Git integration or other bugs that we've seen, without having some risk to adoption. If Power BI was introduced and we're like, oh, the Power Query part has some bugs, by the way, even though it's an end-to-end analytics solution, there would be a lot harder to have that adoption. Like, oh, by the way, when you load data and you create a relationship, it may error out. That didn't occur. Of course, there were obviously some bugs, but right now, to Seth's point, Microsoft Fabric has introduced an end-to-end solution from the products in one area. However, right now, like you said, Mike, we as MVPs are having to go through and we're like identifying, and it's good to go through and say, hey, this is not working. But that's from a business user to go through where they're not going to have, I don't want to say the slightest clue, but they're going to have, just assume that everything is working. And going to assume like, oh, I can create this lake house, and oh, there's Git. I know Git. I can put this all together without understanding how it's supposed to work together. Because again, it's a really easy user interface with a very complicated backend.
And I think that is the mantra by which they're trying to use. They're trying to make it a. I think this is a direct response to, hey, we tried to give you Azure Synapse.
Right.
No one was really dropping in and adopting it. It wasn't becoming that central place for where data things happen. Everything that touches Power BI turns to gold. Let's just bolt it onto Power BI. And so I think the direction here has been good. The great brilliance here was Microsoft actually adopting a good standard. Delta tables was genius. I mean, that what needed to happen in order to stay relevant and competitive with all the other big cloud technology tools out there right now. Everything's doing it.
Yeah, I do align with Tommy, your comment, right? Where consistently all the challenges that I hear about run into with Fabric, I try to put in the context of where was my enthusiasm for those same challenges in Power BI, because there were a lot. There were a lot of workarounds that we were passionately pushing out the door as far as like, oh yeah, this is how you do that. Here. If you can't get that visualization to work, here's what you do. I think the same applies for Fabric in some cases where, oh yeah, there's totally a workaround, right? Here's the things you do. It just has a propensity, some of these answers, to dive deep into technical where business users are not going to know, right? So I think where we're at is like the platform probably is going to be a merge point of two teams, right? Where very technical users can build solutions and business users will pick up the artifacts that they're building. But I think it's going to be a bit longer before the business starts to traverse backwards into some of those artifacts that maybe we were ambitiously thinking was going to happen pretty quickly, just because of some of these like challenges around, like there's not a simple user interface, right? Like the minute I'm dropping into SQL Warehouse and applying code for permissioning, like you're out of bounds of the business user pretty quickly, let alone I don't want them doing it anyway, right?
Right.
But I digress. It's it's the same equilibrium, right? Like new things, we're smashing a lot of things together, and we'll see you on the other side.
It's going to take some time to work out the bugs, get it all figured out. So, I mean, there's parts of Fabric that I'm thinking are production ready. There's other parts of Fabric that are not production ready, and I would not recommend it yet at this point. So
the last thing I'll say is I cannot wait for all this. I want to use all of this, and some of the ideas here with being able to use Git already has been awesome. To be able to push that, to see the changes, what I've been able to do with some of the lake houses and those solutions has been awesome. So I cannot wait for this to be my end-to-end solution. This is a better solution than what I've had in the past for a lot of projects. But like I said, I think we're still getting there.
So in the meantime, we can talk about strategies and ways in which we can plan our adoption of Fabric. And ironically enough, today we're going to be talking about the new changes or the new technical articles around Microsoft Fabric adoption roadmap, right?
Yeah.
Today is business alignment.
I think this is a really good one. So jumping into more business alignment, this is let me pull the article out here. I'll put it in the chat window as well for those who are following along. This is the article for today, business alignment. We're going to be walking through aligning your business direction to where you're going to go directionally. And this makes total sense with Fabric, right? Two teams coming together, figuring out what you're trying to do, who's going to own what responsibilities are going to happen, where are there gaps in your data culture, on how you roll and lead this, because Tommy's heard this all the time. Hey, we're here and we're going to do self-service. Can you describe for me what self-service is? Well, we're going to build reports for you and you request them and we'll just give you the reports and you can go load them when you want. Not sure that's quite self-service how I would define it. So I definitely think there's a level setting and defining things here as well, getting everyone on the same page using the same terminology.
Honestly, this article to me, I want it to be part of the hard skills of a Power BI analyst or at least a director of BI, but really anyone who considers themselves a champion. Everything in this article is, to me, mission critical if you are an analyst, mission critical if you want to see Power BI adoption at your organization. Just as important as learning DAX and being expert in DAX and semantic models, you have to be able to take what the organization is doing, what your teams and departments are doing, communicating with them, listening to them, and aligning that together. None of your technical skills matter without what's really in the content of this article.
This article, I think, is going to boil down to, and again, reading through this one, I think it's really going to boil down to three things. It's going to be the people, it's going to be about your process, it's going to be the technology. Like we've been saying this a lot, and even people add things to this and other aspects of that, those three items. But it really does work out to these three pieces. Focusing on these three pieces, I think, will get you a long way.
Have you guys seen in organizations that have adopted Power BI or have a BI, let's say a centralized BI team, more often than not, the communication with other departments, or is it still where BI is still considered part of IT? And I'll kind of give a little context here for the users reading the article. A large portion of this article is the ability for BI teams, champions, or just analysts to communicate, listen, have consistent communication with departments, teams, and organizations on what are their goals, what is that team or sales team or department trying to achieve, or how can we align with what you're doing from a data strategy point of view. And to me, the maturity levels, when you think about the first stage of Power BI organization, is we will build reports for you. You will request a report. I will build a report. That is the function and role. This dives into really more of that intimate relationship that I think business intelligence is meant to have with the organization. Where are you struggling? What is the business trying to do? Don't think data. What is your team or department trying to do? So I'll ask the question with that context. Are you seeing that evolution where that's the standard? of that intimate relationship with teams and departments, or do you think we're still struggling to get to that point at most organizations?
I've observed every organization has their own kind of data culture already. So depending on where you're at data culturally inside your company, I see a couple different behaviors appearing. One behavior is the business tries to come in and command ownership of it. Power BI is mine. I make reports. We're going to come in. We need control of this. It's not going fast enough. So business comes in and kind of tries to manhandle the solution. And what I find from that is it works to a point, and at some point it gets overwhelming, or the technical challenges increase. And what happens is the purchase capacity, the pro users run out. You're starting to go after premium. You start looking for other things. It's not designed in an optimal way. So now, yes, the business can come in and totally build what they want to build, but unless they have the technical chops or they're working on their own people to build the technical chops that they need in order to use the tool effectively, they wind up overspending. And what happens is they begin to go pull technical people from the IT organization to help them out. I've seen this happen a number of times. I think it's a fairly common pattern. And then what happens now is the business gets overwhelmed. They understand we do need some IT technical support here. And then the business potentially wants to even give back portions of this, like, hey, IT, can you just give us better access to our models? Hey, can you just make tables of stuff that we can connect to through our Power BI side? So there's more of a try to be a handshake after the fact, like, well, okay, we do need technical people from both sides of the team, or hey, IT, can you just make the model and maintain them? We'll build reports on top of them. We'll tell you what the needs are. So that's something I've seen. I've seen other organizations that are very centrally controlled and IT does everything. The company has not taken time to educate data culture into the company, analytics, thinking through things. So what happens is we have people coming in making massive dumps of data. So Power BI is trying to be, or the tools that are existing are data dump tools. Hey, you pick these columns, you pick these tables. From these tables, it just dumps you out a file. And then it's on your own to go figure out how to do it on your own. And that's as much quote unquote self-service as they're willing to provide. I will provide you a system by which you can get out your data. Now, I find when I see that, there is a large amount of mistrust with the data. Either data's coming wrong or people don't trust the data that's coming to them. So I think there's a culture shift there around, can I even trust the quality of the data? No. Therefore, I will just dump out large tables. Those are the two main behaviors that I think I've observed. There's probably many more, but those are the two that I've observed that I've seen. Seth, anything that behaviors you've observed?
Well, yeah. I mean, in terms of teams communicating, I think in every organization, yes, they're communicating. It's just how, right? And I think Mike, you're implying some of the points that I think about slightly differently, but um, what this speaks to is, like, if you have teams that are within their role, right? And by role, I mean it's defined. They're part of the IT group, and their goal is to build the warehouse, and that's what they do. And we built this thing, and and their levels of engagement with the business are defined by that objective of the organization, and that's great and that's fine, but it creates challenges, lots of them, and then sometimes it becomes much more of a technical conversation as opposed to the business conversation, the business problems that we're solving. And that's where I think organizations over time, with some of the business intelligence strategies, have become frustrated and said, yeah, okay, great, glad you spent all this time on the warehouse. I got my own thing going on in Excel here where I can get my own data much faster than you. And that means your business intelligence process, like, something's failed, because the reason you would invest in all that time is so that these people can get access to more data, better data, faster, right? And I think to Mike's other points, organizations that don't have a great data culture also don't have clearly defined objectives. They have less objectives that cross the spans of teams, and as such, those force, I think, some of the lower levels of communication where I'm in my realm, I'm solving my problem, right? It's siloed, or IT is not a helper, right? And I think that's where, in order to elevate the levels of communication that I think you're referring to, Tommy, that it starts with clear objectives within, or goals within an organization that different business units look at and say, I can solve this. Let me help you solve these problems. Or I want to go invest in this infrastructure because that's going to speed up the solution for us to attain this thing. And then it brings the levels of communication outside the realm of, I want to own Power BI, it's my solution, I'm going to do my thing, to joint efforts of, fantastic, great, quick wins. You're doing what you need to do. Let's align on how we grow that into something that is much more useful, because you're going to need this data, you're going to need that data, you're going to need this thing. Well, we can build a model that's going to extend past this. We can build solutions that are going to allow you to share across the organization, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where I think the fabric parts of this, like, you open the doors to much more higher levels of communication. And by higher, I mean, like, you're getting closer to solving the problem as an organization with business units like business intelligence that is key in understanding both aspects, or should, right? Foot in IT, foot in business. Because it, like, if you want one area that I think is probably one of the most exciting in an organization, it is data and business intelligence, because of the fact that you can, with clearly defined objectives, understand the matrix of, like, how you align data to solve these problems. I think much more so than any other part of the organization. So I think, like, to answer the question around communication, I think it aligns with that objectives, data literacy and bringing that up to a point, but that alignment across teams and leveling up that communication is ultimately, I think, where you want to be.
There's two large themes I heard from both you and Mike. I love how you took that differently from the article, where BI is kind of at the dictatorship of the teams or departments. But two large themes I heard from both of you in terms of the barriers to effective business communication alignment. And it sounds like the lack of trust in the entity that is business intelligence at an organization, not so much the data, but what the team, the process, and what BI can achieve is a huge barrier for this to occur. And then the lack of the business intelligence foundation at an organization, in terms of, are they established there? Those two items, those kind of two elements, if you don't have that at your organization, this is not going to happen.
So this brings in a really good point here, particularly talking about the first bullet point now, talking about to achieve business alignment. The first thing that the article talks about is communication alignment.
Right.
And I think, Tommy, your point right there really aligns very well with this. And I would agree, many of these bullet points I use and find them to be very effective when working with a team. One I think that is underrated in this list is be transparent when communicating policies, decisions, and changes to what you're building, right? So that's, having a clearly organized place where your documentation, your processes go, that is extremely helpful. And without that, you're going to struggle as an organization to really be able to develop, again, get people along for the ride, get everyone walking the same direction. So this is really good. Any other bullet points that you guys found that stuck out in the communication alignment piece?
Well, I guess I 100% agree with the second one, where we're talking about a shared awareness of business strategy, right? Because all my talking points were like
right around that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, ultimately that point basically says, for the audience here, a shared awareness of the business strategy and key business objectives among content owners, creators, consumers, and administrators. A common understanding should be integral to the data culture and decision making across the organization. And that's where you get those valuable communication levels, I think. I think, Tommy, to your point though, too, like, when a lot of this conversation, well, it'd be interesting from the fabric standpoint, who's driving this conversation? Is it still the BI team? Probably, because it ultimately, if And the reason I say that's important is, Tommy, you were saying like the BI team can't be trusted, or like they're only building reports and throwing them out the door. I think one of the most important things for a central BI team to do, or to be why it should be established if you don't have it, is to start to solve these larger problems and define what the objectives of that team are. Because if the value of a business intelligence team in an organization is to just be report builders, that's not the value you need to get to these next levels, to where you're even talking about adoption of business intelligence and data across an organization. And what I like about the fact that we're revisiting this topic in the lens of fabric and data is all of this is interrelated, right? Like, you need infrastructures to scale on top of and scale forward so that people have access to data, can aggregate the insights that they need to, that you can build the reports, et cetera. So that's part and parcel of the overall data solution, and why I think it's important to rehash and re-communicate these things, because the business intelligence team should be that team that holistically is looking at this and starting to be strategic. And whether that's the manager, the director of that team engaging, working with executive leadership, there has to be that buy-in, right? Because what you're saying ultimately is, if you're driving this upwards in conversation, is that we need to find alignment, right, on this strategy that would put the business intelligence team in a realm of key report building, but support, process building, like governance, like all the things that we start to find. And this is where I love this article. And by the way, Peter Myers is the author of this one. And like one of my favorite MVP / Microsoft folks. I don't know if he made it the full conversion to the mothership here, but my goodness, like, this guy has been around for a long time, and the content that he provides in here, I love his stuff, but I like the way he can build out these things. I'm really a big fan.
And,
side note.
Well, I think there's a clear distinction we need to make when we say alignment, and to Seth, as very semantic and words have meaning. I'm on the same boat here, compared to just listening to what the business wants. And I think, because a lot of this is about the communication, hearing what the objectives are for the business. That does not mean everything the business dictates you to do, you have to do. I had a, personally speaking, back in the day as a data analyst, when I noticed the change from a data culture point of view, we had a project manager. We finally centralized our business intelligence team, and I still worked with marketing, sales. And I went back to my project manager and I said, we're going to work on this. He said, no, we're not. I said, but that's their request. He's like, where's the business value? He's like, you're not working on the, yeah. And I said,
love that guy. What's his name?
I know. He was in the army.
That's me in the org.
Yeah. And but that to me was a big change, because up until that point, if that team wanted something, which was alignment, you did it. But then they had to prove the value, and we actually had that open communication. That's the move towards alignment, is where business intelligence has an active role in that communication and an active role in the strategy. Okay, team, organization, department, where are you going? What is your 6-month plan as a team? Not from just what you want from data, but what is your active role of, what are your goals? Oh, you guys are doing new accounts. Hey, we can work with you on that. Not just build us a report. It's actually actively part of their team's goals, and then we see how data fits into that. But again, I'm going to go back to that trust thing. They are not going to come to business intelligence or trust business intelligence with those items, to me, unless it's a fully established entity that is a leadership role at the organization.
I want to make a point here. So we're talking high level strategy alignment conversation. I want to lean into a point you said, that if anybody takes anything out of this podcast, and then we're just bobbling heads, and you're not in like an area where you can make these types of decisions, you are. I think the point I want to make is, one of the biggest failings, I think, and it's not like people, but it's this culture that, like, I've been a part of, I've done, right, is failure of organizations to have shared objectives. when collectively the organization as a whole cannot lean into and say, no, these are our 10 objectives for the year. What you're asking me to do does not align to any of those. So what is the business value for me to go spend 3 weeks, which is my estimate, in building this report? Where is the value of that? Well, it's valuable to me. Well, if it's valuable to you, where's the value to the business? Because I need to align your request to an objective. And that's where that conversation is so helpful.
Man.
Because what without that, and where I've seen and still see in large percentages is organizations will operate and kill themselves because nobody has that alignment. So what happens? I'm a dev. Someone's asking me to do something. I go do it.
You're a ticket pusher.
Somebody created a ticket. There must be a need. I'm going to go build this report. A week goes by. You built the report. And then we have this conversation of like, nobody uses it, right? This is going to be the biggest thing since sliced bread. Oh my gosh, 4 weeks spent. Nobody uses it. One person, right? But that's the problem with like, so the problem is don't just blindly follow requests. And it's hard to say that to an individual that says, well, like, what am I supposed to, how do I say no? And you say no in cases where organizations are like, because that doesn't align with anything that our executive leadership team and the organization is saying is helpful. And that's why those processes of OGSMs or OKRs that are shared with the organization, that from the employees all the way to the top, there's alignment, is so critical to all of these conversations because it focuses people's time where it needs to be. Don't just blindly do things. Like if I could say that, don't just blindly do things. Make sure there's value behind it for the business. All right, I'll see you guys later.
No, but that is the critical before I think any of this, any of the rest of the article, it starts there.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, this pairs very well, I think, with the communication alignment, right? So communication alignment is just making sure you're communicating those strategic, tactical planning, those solution types, resolutions that you're trying to build, right? So you're talking a lot about the strategic alignment of what's going on. In your situation there, Seth, you're saying, hey, I'm not going to build, I want this report. I want this data on here. Okay. I think there's you have to align it to a strategic direction of the company. On the other hand, too, I don't think people know what they want day one right out of the box. So I think a lot of times as well, I find giving people a model they can go play with to explore the data that we have helps people understand how it relates and can work together. So I do think there should be, even some of these conversations, like enough of those kind of like one-off requests from enough people. Okay, maybe we're talking about, you need to learn how to actually self-service your data needs. I don't want to be in the business of building every report. I just don't want to. I mean, you could do that. I just don't think I want to be doing that. I think it's more fun to think about the cubes and the models and the bigger picture, and like, let's diagram out the business and how does it actually work. And from there, we can then build larger cube sets, and that's how you teach people how to use that stuff. I think, to me, that's more.
Yeah, those are all, and I agree 100%. It's not like you're every person who's creating value for the business is the frontline report builder.
Correct.
Which is even more important, Mike, to make sure that your work of creating, building, sustaining models that are extending the power of the business,
yes,
aligns to an objective, because that's a larger goal, right? And this is where I'm not, like, objectives of an organization are not go build this report. Objectives of an organization are high level, and they get higher as they go. If somebody's making report requests, though, that don't align to strategic things, which are like typically going to be, hey, we need this report because we need to drive efficiencies and get down to 25% X number, whatever. That's our objective. It's important for me to be able to align to that objective, because if there's one major problem a business intelligence team has, it's what is your ROI for all of the people that you have? Well, I'm a supplemental team. I help these business business units automate things, find insights to build revenue, find insights to drive cost savings. And if I don't have something to hook into and say, here's the value of my team, it becomes very hard in those budget cycles to justify the means of like, why are we sustaining this large group?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, man.
This also goes back to, I think, was something we've said a lot on the podcast previously, but for those who haven't heard it before, it's does this report make money or save money? Is a very simple criteria you can align to on the reports. How am I producing this report to you, and how is it helping you save money or make money for the organization? Plain and simple.
There's 3 layers here, and I think both from the value, like how do we actually achieve value in our solutions, like true value, and obviously making money or saving money, but the intimate part for a team where
Dollars, Tommy. It's all done with dollars.
always dollars.
Monies.
It's action.
Dollar
So
bills.
I'm actually from the article and from the conversation, I kind of have this foundational pyramid of layers, and I want to focus on the top one, but there's 3 layers of how effective business alignment works. Our OKRs, goals, the bottom layer, everything starts there. The next layer is your executive sponsorship engaged. And the last layer is the communication. And I want to touch on the communication because that's a huge part of this article, but let's really define, there's 2 types of communication here that need to be effective in order for this to work. There's outward communication, promotion, materials, but then the other side is dialogue, and dialogue builds relationship. And as much as this article is talking about communication, I really think it's talking more about building relationships with your teams and organization, because we can always do effective promotions, and we have our teams channel, and we have our centralized portal. But without us having a true dialogue with organizations and teams and departments, we're not going to understand their true business, where the values are, where the needs are. And they're also not going to know who we are, or where they're not going to know who the business team is and who they're going to trust. Again, it has to be a 2-way street here. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on kind of what the definition of communication is here?
I don't see that. I mean, I see your point on what you're talking about there, but I don't see that being present very much in the article. I mean, I think the article talks a lot about things that I think are very relevant here are, I mean, you mentioned outward communication, right? I think that's a lot of that executive leadership, getting them buy-in, communicating high-level directions and goals, what we're trying to do with our data. I do think there is, I don't really know how this fits in, but I definitely know there's a large amount of governance and compliance alignment as well. So who has access to what information? This is becoming much more important, especially with Fabric now. There's a lot more things you can build. There's a lot more artifacts that come with the new Fabric space. So when do we use that? And I think there's a bit of an excitement. I mean, I feel right now is there's a bit of excitement like, oh, Fabric does all this great stuff. We should always be thinking about Fabric next. I'm not sure I'm convinced that Fabric is the best solution for every situation in all cases at this point. I think there's a lot of great features that come with it. But I think you could still just use a regular pro or premium per user workspace and get away with just a good majority of it. Just runs just fine without needing all the Fabric components, especially if your organization already has things built that are already doing what Fabric is doing today.
So let me push back on you, Mike, on that just a tad. So the communication alignment, making planned for central teams and regular meetings between different teams and groups. Strategic alignment, you must define your data analytics and BI goals and tactical planning. And then there's an important box that says to achieve effective alignment, make it a priority to dismantle any communication barriers. How do
that's all outward. I mean, I feel like a lot of that's outward facing. There is something here about like, executive alignment or maintaining business alignment later on down the article. And in the maintaining business alignment, it talks about make sure you have a feedback process. And I think that makes sense. I really align with that one, right? Solicit feedback and get it back in.
Yeah. And I find it interesting. I'm taking that completely. When I read it, I'm seeing that as active, like from a pure relationship point of view, less from the promotional point of view of just actually meeting with users. But I don't know. Just kind of Seth, do you have active meetings with teams and departments in terms of either is it more from a planning point of view, or is it more do you actually have the outward communication?
Well, I think there's multiple parts of this. Like this being the alignment article speaks to me that this is around the developing the strategies and getting alignment and communicating that strategy, right? Like you need buy-in. You can't just do this stuff on your own and expect it to work. Right back to the point where it's not going to be a shared objective. It's not a goal of the organization. So like building the story that you need to share and communicate is communicating that, I think, externally. The tactical part of that is once you get the buy-in, right? Where I think this you and Mike were starting to go is like, how do you engage with the teams? Like, I need to, okay, based on an overall strategy, what we're going to do is we're going to align to the team, the business goals. Like, what are their objectives? What are they trying to accomplish? Even without goals and objectives, like what is that business team on the hook for? There's a number, or there's a efficiency, or there's a something.
It's going to be revenue, or it's going to be a savings.
Dialogue and that relationship building, right? I think is that different type of communication, and then what goes along with that is also how do you start communicating or building a community within an organization that you can support, right? And that's where I think that feedback loop starts to come in really heavily, where can you support that? Can you support all of the influx of content, like contributors and not just consumers of data, but people who want to help, who want to be part of the self-service solution, if there's part of that.
You've got a plan for that.
Right. So I think there are multiple levels, the way I see that, as far as like how you need to engage and communicate with different parts of the organization, depending on where you're at.
I like this one comment inside the maintain business alignment section where it talks about assign a responsible team. A working team needs to review the feedback provided by people. Organizers need to have realignment sessions, and this team is responsible for aligning the planning and priorities between the business and your data strategy. One example of this is you have other legacy systems, whatever they may be, Oracle, DB2, right? There may be a strategy that says these systems are becoming costly and we want to move away from them. What do we need to do to get there? Part of that might be migrate to Fabric, migrate to other tools, move to cloud. Those are bigger strategic decisions that need to happen, and they don't happen overnight. So there's someone's making the decision and spending lots of money to make sure that happens, and so people can still get their data. So I do think, you have to listen to the feedback of the organization. Are there thousands of SQL? Are there thousands of access databases riddled across the company?
Yeah.
And we're creating little mini silos of data all over the place. Are your Excel files getting really long and slow? Have you ever had an instance where you're reviewing your Excel work with a very high level in the organization and it fails? Like those are moments in time where you could galvanize pieces around this and pull teams in to really align to a direction and make change. You can capitalize on those moments.
And Mike, the focus here, I think, is on the people. I can remember and know from projects I've worked on and working inside, the people here are the most vital part of this, and identifying the right people, both from your BI team, if it's centralized, but more importantly, from the business side, identifying people who get it, who understand the value of Power BI, but people are going to be transparent with you as well. That makes or break this side, because without their understanding of what the needs are for their team or department, and without them also trusting you, trusting the business team, you're not going to get the right value from here. And again, I can go through multiple projects where it's like, oh, we would have never identified that unless you brought that to the surface. And it was never a need for business intelligence, but, oh, you guys are migrating to this. Well, yeah, we need to make that a priority for us too. Or just like people are struggling with their KPIs. They don't trust it. Having and identifying people in the business who trust in the data culture and trust in business intelligence, ideally in a leadership role, manager, vice president, what's so not, that is so vital to this, even before process, even before where you are with technology.
Yeah, I think from the business alignment perspective, one of the key parts to think about here when developing strategies is to ensure that you only go so far as to lock in on the core things initially before you launch, and because every business unit is different, they're all gonna have unique characteristics that you need to be aware of and engage with in order to like be in order to solve their problems, right? They're going to have different tech stacks. They're going to have different processes. They're going to have different things that you need to sync and align to, and make sure that you find that level of paths forward of how you can most effectively assist them in what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I think this is.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Tommy.
I was going to say a big part of this too is just in that same area, things are evolving all the time. Whatever your initiatives are in January, I can almost guarantee you by June,
100%.
everything changes. And that's part of what the word is, consistent communication. Not, we had a call with our department in January and that's what we're focusing on.
Mm-hmm.
Priorities change. Your team changes, their teams change,
yes,
or the situations change. And I think that goes back to our reports as well, where we build a report and what do we always say? How do we adapt and what's the second life cycle of it? Same thing in our projects.
Yeah. So another thing I'll kind of also point out here too, if you think about, there are smaller questions about the business, and then there are bigger questions about the business. So what I mean by this is bigger questions are like, are we going to make enough money to make payroll this month? Are we getting enough revenue in the door, right? Where are our products and how are we meeting our customers' needs? Those are some of the bigger questions. There are smaller questions that are around, how's my department performing? What's my product line doing? And those are more catered towards those individual users that have very specific business needs. I feel like the very large questions do not change very frequently. However, the smaller those are very tactical questions in order for someone to do their daily job. So I think this maintaining business alignment, I think having executive sponsorship, I think regularly engaging your community, asking for feedback, what can we do better? That just aligns the expectations of the business better with where you're going directly for this BI, and you can answer the big questions and the small questions by using this methodology. So I think this is another very solid article.
Yeah.
Really good topics, and I highly would recommend a read through on this one.
Let me ask you guys one last question. I think a lot of this is obviously incredible, and we're talking a lot about like what it's already structured. If you're just starting off and you want to start establishing this at your organization, whether you have a BI team, where do you start? What are the most important elements to the beginning stage of this, of making this an expectation at the organization rather than something new and introduced?
Well, first and foremost, I would 100% read all the way through the adoption roadmap. Take your times, make notes. At the end of every section in the adoption roadmap, there's a beautiful little assess yourself, level 100 to level 500. Put yourself on a scale. And I'd literally go through and write through each of these sections inside the adoption roadmap and rate yourself where you are in a company. So if nothing else, one, it's learn from others who have done this before. Pick their best practices and utilize them. I think that'll be your best win for success. I'll lean on what Matthew Roach said. I can't take credit for this one. You want to focus on your executive sponsor. This will never win unless you make your executive sponsor look good. So whatever you're doing, no matter what it is, whatever BI initiative's happening here, you want to focus on, make it easy for them to just, yeah, Tommy's doing a great job. Tommy's figuring things out. He's got a plan. He's got roadmaps. He's documented things. It's publicly available. I can see the process he's building. Like, all these things are occurring. He's got scheduled meetings bi-monthly or quarterly. There's a roadmap. I mean, all these things you don't need approval to go do. You can just have these things established, and it adds credibility to your process and what you're doing. So that's kind of where I would start with. I would start with executive sponsor, read the adoption roadmap, and follow its guidance.
Yeah. Like, this is almost a good final thoughts question, Tommy.
It is
Right.
a good
Like,
call.
that's the point.
I 100% agree. The maturity matrix is whichever one you want to pick. There's a bunch out there, not just the ones that are in these technical articles, but part and parcel. They give you the context and some of the understanding of where you're at, where you need to go. And that's very important for if this is brand new to you. It gives you context, the words, the things that you can go look up and research and align to, and start building a framework for strategy, i.e. a story, right? Because you're gonna need to not just develop a relationship with an executive sponsor, but pitch them that story, and you need to get them to buy in on it before any of the larger big things are gonna be able to be lifted in the organization. And then once you have that alignment, or at least the buy-in, start building business strategy. Start to plan out, like, how do you solve some of the biggest problems in the organization? And then you start adding in the pieces that the organization would want or should want to invest in. The people, the infrastructure, data access, how reporting tools, processes, all of this comes with that as a byproduct of your engagement in trying to solve these larger problems for an organization. So it's a kind of just get started, but the matrix is a great place to kind of set a framework for your head to dive into these articles, which they do a fantastic job of. This is probably one of the best series of articles that they came out with Power BI and now Fabric around adoption of Power BI and their tooling. But there's so much more there from just a business intelligence perspective that it's almost a step by step, right? Go build all this stuff, engage and align. Here's how you build all this next stuff, and there's obviously uniqueness and differences within organizations. And that's where the nuance comes in. It's not just plug and play. Every place is different. Every culture is different, and the set of challenges are different. But
it's very wise. It's very wise for them to do this kind of deep dive, how to make it go. They've been doing BI for 30 years plus with all these different tools. They should know what's going on, and they're building tools for this. This helps you understand. They understand the problem, and they're going to come up with a solution that's going to help you.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say, I think just towards this, and what I really love is the underlying theme here is consistency. And the reason I say that is it is actually a negative effect if you do these items once and not continual. If you're going to start doing a roadmap, you better well update it. If you're going to start doing business alignment meetings, you cannot do it once. If you do it once, it's actually going to have a negative effect. All of the things go into data culture because it becomes the expectation. I know sales or market BI will meet with my team on a quarterly basis. I know I can see where our major and minor goals are on a consistent basis. If you're going to start this, you better well have the plan to keep it consistent and keep a long roadmap here.
Yep.
I know it's final thoughts, but that's such a good point, because think about those levels of communication: story to the executive, story for strategy, et cetera. The wider that communication goes, you get one shot. In a couple of those areas, you better make sure that you have things aligned. And once you open up big strategies to an organization, or all those lines of communication that go open, you need to be able to support it. Otherwise, we know business people, we talk it all the time. What are they going to do? Find their own solutions, because yours doesn't work. Right? Yeah.
Export to Excel.
Once you start, the fun shouldn't stop. So
right.
I think is that the not pop.
It's a good saying, regardless. Pringles.
That's
Pringles.
Dorito.
No.
I think it's Doritos. Once you have one, you can't stop, or you can't just have one, or something like that.
The guy with the mustache, the potato chip with the mustache.
That's Pringles.
That's Pringles. Yeah, he's the one who says pop don't stop. Yeah, that's data culture.
Okay. Yeah. Data culture. Great.
Make it
just like Pringles. Awesome. Thank you very much for listening today. Sorry for the weird timing on things, but for those who are listening on the podcast online afterwards, hope you're enjoying your run. I hope you're enjoying your walk. So if you like this episode, if this was intriguing and you found something interesting out of this article, we would love it if you would share it with somebody else. It really helps get the word out there about the podcast and what we're talking about, and just discussing more relevant topics around Power BI. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Do you have a question, an idea, or topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. Finally, join us live every Tuesday, Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all Power BI Tips social media channels.
Excellent. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.